Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Jackson, I too am from Oregon. However, I grew up in Michigan. My grandfather spent many years working at Ford Motor Company, both before and after the UAW, and I assure you, my grandfather's long passed away, but I assure you the working conditions were much better after the UAW came to Ford Motor Company. My home state of Oregon has actually been a leader in addressing a lot of barriers faced by working families. And in fact, just recently, workers at a Burgerville restaurant in Portland voted to unionize, and they established one of the first formally recognized fast food unions in the country, and this was done in an election overseen by the NLRB. In fact, after the election, the company issued a statement saying that the employees voted to unionize in the fair and free election overseen by the NLRB, and strengthening their collective voice and the rights of workers, especially in industries like fast food, where we know that many full-time workers still struggle to make ends meet. Their union advocacy is going to be an important voice and a way to help them through advocating for better working conditions, fair wages, and good benefits. And I would hope that our committee would be focused on growing the middle class, as we saw from Mr. Sablan's information in the opening statement, and that includes making sure that workers' voices are protected and preserved in our evolving, changing workforce. But instead, we're discussing efforts that seem to reduce the collective power of workers and limit their ability to have a voice on the job. I wish we could go back to the drawing board and talk about how we can increase workers' voices. And although many of the workers today would join a union if given the choice, many fear retaliation for supporting or engaging in organizing efforts. And according to a study from the Economic Policy Institute, companies threaten to close shop in 57% of union elections. They fire workers who are organizing in 34% of elections. They threaten to cut wages for workers in 47% of elections. And they use one-on-one supervisory meetings to intimidate and threaten workers in 54% of elections. Now, our state of Oregon has passed legislation banning those forced meetings, but nationally. So, Dr. LaFaso, given the staggering data, are there adequate protections in place to deter employers from discriminating against or taking retaliatory action against employees for engaging in protected activities under the NLRB? Because I noted that in Oregon, the company said this was a fair and free election. What are the most important reforms we need to modernize the labor laws to protect those workers who do engage in protected activity?
Well, you're right. The stats are staggering, and I'd really love to get I'd love to get the information on that. We know that given that you said 50% of companies will threaten to close plant, this is actually extremely intimidating. You heard some of the witnesses say right. They're afraid of certain things. They're afraid to say that they want to leave the union. But think about it: losing your job is much more coercive. And that the reason is because the remedies are bad. And so there's no real teeth. And so what we need to do is for these types of, they're called, I don't call them this, but most people in the business call them tips. So threats, coercive interrogations, promises that are to basically bribes, solicitation, other things, surveillance. What you need to do is really focus on those and say, okay, we are going to make these a priority. We're going to have them have more teeth, better remedies for these particular things, and I would definitely focus on those tips.
Thank you. And as Ranking Member Sablan noted, upholding the right of workers to form a union, and as I mentioned, we want this to be fair and free elections, is an important way to reduce income inequality. We know there are still a lot of working families who need help getting ahead. Unionized workers have had better access to paid holidays, paid sick leave, and retirement benefits, and additionally, the presence of a unionized workforce really helps raise the standards for wages and working conditions for all workers. So we shouldn't have unnecessary delays for workers to join or form a union. So Dr. LaFaso, your testimony mentioned how the NLRB's 2014 election rule removed many of the unnecessary delays that deprive workers of their rights under the National Labor Relations Act. And last week I joined many members of this committee in submitting a comment to the NLRB making a similar argument. Can you discuss the implications of long election delays for workers who are seeking union representation and the importance of the 2014 rule?
Well, I think we heard that actually even in the testimony today, and indeed, under the new election rules, they actually drop blocking charges. So if we were to get rid of that, the election rules, it would actually, Mr. Jackson's problem would be worse. So we don't want to have those delays. It's important that justice delayed is justice denied. So now I've quoted the Magna Carta twice today, but justice delayed is justice denied. Say one more thing is that I would say that it's more forced democracy is what we're really doing here, and that if there were, I would agree with a secret ballot election if it were against Union A versus Union B, but it's the choices between a union and no union. And as you said, when there's a union, the working conditions are better.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady.